we rely heavily on our digital communication. If I think back to however many years ago it was before we had email, and I'm decades older than some of you guys. So um, it emails become a huge burden for most of us. I mean, how often do you play whack-a-mole with your email? I bet you do it more than your 9 to 5. I bet you do it before you go to sleep, when you get up in the morning, unless you have decided intentionally to stop it. I bet maybe when you're at a stop sign, you pick up your phone to whack down a few more emails or keep up. I mean, they are just always piling up there. What a huge burden and pressure that is. So, besides email, what about text? And when I used to be a therapist, and I did that for 20 years, I worked frequently with couples and other people working in relationships or transitions in their lives. And I actually had clients who were in my office talking to me about the fight they had with their wife or their husband. And they're actually pantomiming what they said, only it was in a text. And they're doing this in the air, in the room. I said, "You had that conversation in a text? No wonder the fight went on and on." And they did it all in over text. So if you're going to have an argument with somebody, it's much better to do it in person and not in an email and not in a text, because we lose our ability really for the nonverbals, for the tone of voice. And you know how you can get in trouble for just writing a really brief email and people presume that it's curt or that you're angry with them or something like that. Because what we actually end up doing psychologically is we are projecting whatever it is that's in our heads onto that email, especially if it is, short or concise. So same thing with text. It is so hard to read what someone really means in a text unless we're super careful about how we write it. And so many misunderstandings happen. The other thing that's happening is, if you've seen kids walking down the street, I watched two preteens going by on their scooters in front of my house 3 times a row last week. It must be their mom said, "Get out of here, go outside and play." But what they're doing is they're walking and rolling down the street, and they're each on their cell phones. I mean, I don't need to preach more about cell phone, but what you notice, it robs people of their interpersonal communication even when they're with each other. So I'm challenging you to think about not letting your tech interfere with your interpersonal communication, because that is of utmost importance for people to not feel lonely, to feel connected, something we all missed during COVID. And it is continuing to a certain degree. Okay, next. If you're in the office and you can conduct an in-person meeting, why don't you? Set it up as in person, explain why you're going to do it, explain why we want to continue to have a culture where people care about each other, where they actually feel comfortable talking to each other face to face, and where people actually pick up a phone, maybe, to get things done more, shall I say expeditiously? Shall I say efficiently? You pick up a phone, if you actually get somebody on the other end of it, it is a lot quicker to establish something that you needed to vet with somebody than writing bunches of emails back and forth or bunches of texts back and forth. So I encourage you to use some of these older methods in order to claim your human interactions again. Okay, what about blurring the lines between our work and our personal time? Is there any personal time that's not interrupted by work? If there is, good for you. But a lot of us allow that our work to come into our personal lives on vacations, at home, after the kids go to bed, after you watch a show, you'll pick up your phone and check your email. Because again, you got to play whack-a-mole. But anytime you do that, you are bringing work into your home space. And you think about whether that's helpful for you. Perhaps it is. And perhaps you're in the kind of business, like, I have a friend who's a real estate person, and there's no such a thing as turning off your phone if you're in that industry. But there could be times where you check it periodically instead of every time you hear a notification. So all this to say, Is our tech in charge of our lives? For me, it has become so. I have noticed that if I'm at a stop sign, I have compulsively picking up my phone. And sometimes when I'm not at a stop sign, which is really not good. And the reason is because our brains become habituated to having either the reward of getting rid of another email or the reward of finding something good on that phone. How often can we just sit and look at traffic anymore and wait? And what goes on in our minds when we do is another good question. I'm like, and if when I was a therapist, if I saw somebody checking their phone, I'm like, are they really tuned into this conversation? Are they really paying attention? If you're doing that to somebody else, it might be just, oh, what's coming in right now. You get habituated to it. You could ignore that until the person has walked away, until, you're done with that interchange, until you're done talking to your kid about what they really need to, hear from you or have you listen. When you're always checking, it gives the impression that you're not listening, even though you can multitask like that. Think about the human interaction in the relationship, and not just at home, at work too. So nobody's doing anything wrong. What we're doing is succumbing to the slow, creeping, insidious nature of our tech, habituating our brains to want it. And I'm not even going to be dissing marketers or anything like this, because we do it to ourselves. We become addicted, so to speak, to this stuff. And what that really means is that your brain is just expecting it. And it's a reward, to your neurotransmitters to pick up your tech, to notice, to look. It's bringing stimulation to your brain, and your brain gets used to it. And then it becomes a habit or compulsion. I'm not being clinical here, not saying anybody has any clinical disorders. I'm just saying this happens to every human. What I am here to say is I want you to please join me in taking your life back from your helpful devices so that they are truly helps to you instead of controlling you and perhaps breaking down the human side of your life. Okay. I'm hoping that you'll just start thinking about how you use your tech and making sure that you're in control of it instead of it being in control of you. So thanks so much for listening, and see you next week.